Hello, welcome. Join us. Join us in the room. It's 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific. We'll just wait 30 seconds or so to let people come on in. As you're coming on in, please introduce yourself. I'll start. I'm Greg. I'm the head of marketing here, and you'll get to know Thomas and Jeremy here to my right, your left, your right, my left. But as we wait, would love in the chat. The chat is the best opportunity for you to engage with Jeremy, Thomas, myself, and other people here in the conversation. So let us know your name, where you're coming from, and if you've got, be it an EV charging, barrier that you're facing at your properties or with your clients, or if you have a particular question, or generally where you're at. Do you have charges in your properties or with clients and looking to do more? Is this your first time learning about EV charging? Kind of love any and all insight as we wait for the next couple seconds or so. Hey everyone. I got in there. Jeremy's in. All right. Well, as people start coming in, please again let us know. I'll be here typing on the chat, but it's 4:01, so let's kick this off. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy and Thomas. So take it away, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Thank you, everyone, tuning in from near and far to our webinar on effortless EV charging for your property. My name is Jeremy Cohen. I'm the Director of Real Estate Partnerships here at SWTCH. It's really my role in the organization to work with developers, owners, and operators of real estate to help them with their EV charging strategy. No two buildings are the same. No two portfolios are the same. And we really just look at it holistically. We say, where is your property based? What state is it in? What kind of asset it is? And we look to help and provide the best possible EV charging strategy for that. I'm joined by Thomas. Thomas, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Thomas Martin. I come from the sales engineering side of SWTCH. So you can think of my team as the people to help get the technology in the ground, the solutions expert, the technology experts. And today I'm going to give you a snapshot into what we see on a day-to-day. Between Jeremy and myself, we've seen thousands of buildings, whether that's large buildings in downtown areas to rural public sites. Jeremy and I bring a wealth of experience, and that's why we decided to put on a webinar today to hopefully share some of that information and the lessons learned over the years.
Perfect. Thanks, Thomas. So we have a jam-packed agenda for everyone today. We're going to cruise. We're going to make it nice and simple. Pretty much, I'll start off a little bit. You'll hear from Thomas midway through, and we'll wrap it up with a bow. But pretty much, we want to start with the summary and why EV charging now. It's definitely a buzzword. It's a hot topic. Maybe you're seeing it throughout your states and your cities. And we kind of wanted to just start with the plan. If you're new to this, this webinar is crafted for those who might be totally elementary and 101, all the way up to an expert level. There's something for everyone in there. And pretty much our ethos, which you'll hear throughout the presentation, is the path forward, which we call plan, install, manage, and service. So before we dive into the meat and potatoes, just a little bit about SWTCH for those of you who are unfamiliar. SWTCH has been in business since 2016. And over this incredible run, we have over 18,000 chargers out there on the SWTCH network with a remarkable uptime of 99.7%. And SWTCH at our core, we are a software company. You'll hear a little bit more about that, where we are agnostic on our hardware offerings, and that allows us to service these incredible clients that you see below. Some owners and operators of real estate who trust us with their EV charging strategy. So you'll hear throughout the presentation a little bit about obviously EV readiness and why it's not always simple, and hopefully the ways in which we can make it as simple as possible. But EV charging as a whole has just really flourished in a ton of different asset types. So what was maybe traditionally EV companies starting in just multifamily, and same with SWTCH as a whole, the industry has matured as our company. And in turn, we like to service these other asset types, whether it be workplace, retail, parking, hospitality, education, you name it, because at the end of the day, EV charging is a real estate play. People are charging where there is real estate and where they're parking their cars. We're going to get into that in a little bit as well. So as I said before, we have this ethos, I think, at Switch, and it is the design concept. If you're taking this from the beginning, if you are a developer, the best part is to bring us in early. Let's look at the site plans. Let's see where you've mapped out maybe the chargers, or maybe where we need to tweak that, within any given site. From there, where they're looking at a new development or a retrofit opportunity, we're working with qualified electricians and installation partners to go out on site to get an accurate quote, right? You get the labor from someone, you can get the materials from us. From there, we're going to package it up and we're going to provide you the whole installation. So that installation would be turnkey. So you have your install, your labor, your parts, your materials, your warranties, so on and so forth. And from there, we're going to manage. And Thomas is really going to take the time to dive into the manage portion, because that's really what makes Switch. And I think what also makes the EV charging journey different from, let's just say, just putting in what we call a glorified outlet at some point later down the line. So why EV charging now? I mean, EV charging is certainly not new, but I would say over the past couple of years, there has been serious momentum and steam behind it. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to pepper this presentation with a bunch of statistics. I mean, I personally think statistics tell the story. So let's tell the story. And if that really is, their EV sales are projected to hit 53% of all cars in 2030, we really need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to support that. And there are a ton of news articles out there that will say one thing and news articles that will say another. But really the truth is the cars are being sold electric and hybrid. And also we need to make sure that the infrastructure is there to support that for any type of given driver scenario. And talking about driver scenarios, another statistic is 80% of charging happens where cars are dwelling. So if you look at a multifamily environment where people are coming home and plugging in after work, let's say when they get home at 5 or 6 p.m., if you go into an office, you're going into the office from 9 to 5, you're plugging in. People want to charge where it's most convenient. And no matter what the statistics say, they don't always want to go to a supercharger or a fast charger along major US highways. They want to just charge at home. It's the convenience of EV charging, or at the office. So one of the biggest things I hear in my world is the infrastructure, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But there are incredible active incentive programs that are out there, rebates, incentives on a state, a city, a utility-wide basis. We're going to take the time to walk through that in a little bit as well. But if you're new to the EV charging landscape and journey, just know that there are resources out there to take the burden to put these devices in at your property. So the plan. And more questions to consider. So I'm sure if you jumped on this webinar, if you're totally new to this, you're just thinking, I have so many questions, where to begin? How does this all get started? What is an EV charger? Which one do I need? That's why we're here. We're going to walk you through it. So what type of chargers are available and what do you need? And as I've been talking for these past couple of minutes, we highlighted a ton of different asset classes that are out there, different use cases that are out there. Let's start very elementary. And in front of you, you can see the level 1 charger. And this is basically a charger. If you had a single family home, you have your garage, you pull in every night, and you're pretty much just plugging into your standard 120 volt outlet, the same outlet that is in your kitchen, in a hallway, whatever it may be. This is a trickle charge. It is certainly not fast by any means. It's convenient. I would say it probably charges a car at 100% close to 24 hours. So you by no means are getting a quick fix here. You're getting a slow trickle charge. Not what we're going to be spending a majority of our time on today, but I thought it would be important for those that are new to the conversation. What we will be spending a majority of our time talking about today, and Thomas is going to take a deep dive into it, is the level 2 charger. Hands down, the most versatile And we are finding that these level 2 chargers are going into those standard environments where these cars are dwelling. So whether that be a multifamily environment, whether that be a commercial environment, hospitality environments, education environments, it is the most versatile, it is the most bang for your buck, and it is just perfect for that. Thomas will get into that in a bit more. Just want to give you a high-level overview. And lastly, the level 3 charger, also known as the DC fast charger. This is a large piece of equipment, as you can see. The size alone is big. The infrastructure cost to get these things in the ground is expensive. The hardware is also expensive. These can be found along major US highways, corridors, retail centers, some quick shopping areas, Whole Foods, Targets, you name it. Not what we're going to be spending a lot of time on either, but again, wanted to give you the high level overview of the different levels of fast chargers. So in my world, I spark up conversations with real estate groups all the time. And the first question I get asked is, how many chargers should I install? There's no clear-cut answer. People will go by unit counts. They'll go by what's in the parking lot now. The truth is, I like to say, survey the tenants, because you never know what's really going on at the building until you ask. You can just ponder, but again, go by the statistics. Take the time to see how many EVs there are in your parking lot now. And if you have no EV chargers in the parking lot now, just wonder, where are those tenants or residents charging if they're not using any chargers that are potentially not at your property? Put out a survey monkey. I'm a big fan of this. Send this out to the residents, tenants. Just ask 4 simple questions. Do you have an EV charger now? Or do you have an EV car now? Okay, great. If we put chargers in, how likely are you to use them? I'm sure yes, a lot. If you don't have an EV car now, how likely are you to get an EV car if we are going to install chargers at the property? And 3, would you use them? That's really what it comes down to. So moving on, I went on for that slide a little too long. I apologize. Thank you, Thomas. The other questions outside of how many should you install, it really is how many can you install, which is a whole different conversation and the most important part of that whole conversation as a whole. And really, to begin, you need to assess the electrical capacity at the building level. Without that, we'll have no idea whatsoever. So you have that conversation, but the biggest conversation, I think, if you're in real estate, is the budget, right? So how much available capital do you need on hand to do a project of this magnitude? Maybe you're looking at this as, I'm going to sink the CapEx, what's the payback required on this? If you're not looking at it as a CapEx, maybe you're looking at it as an OpEx, totally different conversation. And then also the available incentives and credits that I alluded to earlier, so that way you can offset some of this cost. All of this is part of the bigger picture and helping with the planning. This is exactly what Thomas and I do every single day to hopefully take off some of that burden for groups that are looking to put these chargers in. Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Once we're through the planning phase, or at least on our way, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves until we introduce the hardware and the software into the conversation. And the reason I say that is because the software and the hardware is really the cornerstone to the function in the day-to-day of how those EV chargers in the site behaves once installed. And we're going to want to use that hardware and software to see if we can reap any benefits upstream in the design phase. And what I mean by that is save dollars. Infrastructure is a very significant component of EV charging. So how can we use technology to reduce the infrastructure spend at day one? So when we're talking EV charging hardware, a question that we want to lead off with is, can I just buy any level 2 charger, install it, and begin charging? The answer is yes, but if that charger is a standard one, let's say it's from Home Depot, anybody can plug into it and charge for free. And so for your property, if it's a public destination, or even if it's a multi-unit residential building, you're going to want to bill for energy because it adds up. And what we've seen in the industry over time is free chargers are being replaced with paid chargers because EV drivers will flock to them, and you will be simply giving away large sums of electricity for free. So the cornerstone here is, no, you cannot just buy any EV charger if you want to enable features like payment. And so when looking at the technology in the hardware, or at least the technology umbrella, we divide it into 4 key pillars. And we're going to dive into each one to talk about the key considerations within and how they affect the overall project. So let's start with the physical charger themselves. So when looking for a level 2 charger, what should I be considering? And so if there's one technical standard you take away from today's conversation, it is the following: OCPP. EV chargers are, for the most part, a smart electrical outlet. They can do, turn the vehicle on and off, things like that. But for the most part, they're a commodity. As you can see, we work with over 30 different makes and models, produced, locally, internationally, you name it. And what this allows us to do is really recommend the best solution. But how can we do that, technically speaking? OCPP is how we do that. Think of OCPP like a common language that these chargers are built to, allowing networks like us and other companies to operate them. So the analogy I like to use to drive this home is, in the telecom space, if you buy a cell phone from AT&T or Verizon, you're not locked into that network. You can keep your iPhone, take the SIM card out, and put a new one in from a different carrier if, for whatever reason, the service isn't good. The same applies here in the EV charging space. If you are purchasing an OCPP charger and you're not satisfied with the quality of service from the network, you can simply move on to another network without having to buy new charging stations. And in the industry, if you've been following the news, there have been a couple of large accounts, whether them be utilities or government owned, that have purchased proprietary assets and actually have to rip them out of the ground in order to move on to a network that they trust. And so that is why we like to highlight OCPP as the cornerstone, because it enables you the freedom of choice as an asset owner to move between networks that give you and offer the best service. So if there's one thing you take away from today's presentation on the tech side, OCPP is the note. Here's a quick list of, I'll say, some of the key players that we use. Everything from level 2s right through to DCFC. We like to make it easy on the buyer. We will recommend the hardware that is most beneficial to the job, whether it's price point, function, size, features. We can break all that down and make it easy. It's very easy to get lost in spec sheets and in comparing hardware model to model. So we like to make it efficient by recommending 1 or 2 models for a given project. What other considerations do we want to bring into play when, in addition to just the EV chargers? So when you come to a building, you start looking at all the required materials and labor to install. You're first going to look at, what EV chargers do I need? Are they pedestal mounted? Do we want cable retractors? Are they indoor, outdoor, etc.? We're going to want to look at, how do we bring power to those EV chargers, whether it's coming from an electrical room in the parking garage or a transformer in the parking lot of a grocery store. This is a very important factor because we often want to locate the EV chargers close to the electrical source to minimize the electrical and civil costs of putting them in the ground. One detail often overlooked, especially in underground parking garages, is how do we get internet to these chargers? Because they are performing real-time functions like energy management as well as payment and billing, we do need an internet connection. And so we're going to want to make sure this is considered upfront. And I say that because there have been a number of projects where we get called in after the fact because there's a problem and they didn't consider how do they do internet, and it's a change order, which doesn't make the customer very happy. So we like to highlight that upfront to make sure it's known in the original scope of work. And then finally, the software. The software is how we enable all of the functions to allow the property to set those EV chargers up to guide the behavior of the drivers as intended, whether it's time of day pricing, locked to a private audience. Certain charges can be assigned to certain parking space holders, loitering penalties. The software is going to enable the property to have a hands-off EV charging experience while guiding the behavior of the drivers to match the needs of that parking garage and building or that parking space. So let's talk software. Why do we need software is a question we usually ask early in the journey. This is the second pillar here on our journey. So why do we need software if, like I mentioned, these chargers are really just big electrical outlets for vehicles? But before I answer that, I think it's important to ask yourself the following questions for the given project. For my building, or for the building in question, who is going to have access to these chargers? How much revenue is going to be made, and how do I know how much? How is the money collected? How do drivers interface with the chargers, and how do they pay? What if all of the chargers are on at the same time? What if a driver leaves their vehicle in the EV charging spot when they're finished charging? How do I potentially incentivize them to remove it? And finally, how do I know if something breaks? All of these questions are very hard to answer without that software layer. And this is what it's designed for. This is why companies like us exist, is because we're building the software to make that management touch-free and automated. And so I can definitely fill an hour on talking about features, but the ones we want to highlight today are access control. Whether it's a private or shared environment, we can control who has access to them. We can set the rates to be variable, whether it be time of day, energy demand, whether your building pays a different price of energy according to the time of day. It all can be matched in the rates that the drivers pay, so that you're recouping the right amount of money for the energy that the chargers dispense. Loitering. Loitering is a common thread in outdoor lots, because if the parking's full or if they're in prime time parking spaces, how do we make sure that people are respecting those parking spaces and not essentially freezing an expensive asset, which could be used to fuel a vehicle? So we have ways to do that, and it's automated so that you don't have to allocate any additional security resources to maintaining those spaces. And then finally, the real-time charging insights. So this isn't a dashboard that you're going to sign into every day and be, on it constantly. We like to refer to it as something that you set up initially. You can put it on the back burner for many months, often a year, and we can check in once 6 or 10 months has gone by to review the data in the dashboard to see if the behavior of the drivers matches what we intended with the settings that we set up during the commissioning phase. So are people respecting time of day? Are people respecting the spaces and moving their car when fully charged? That's what the dashboard's here to do. Now, energy management and providing energy to these chargers is not something we want to forget in the design conversation. The question Jeremy and I get time and time again is, our buildings weren't handled or designed to handle electricity when it was designed, whether it be 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so we simply cannot spend $100,000 plus on new infrastructure to accommodate this amenity. And the good news is you do not need to do that. And there's ways around that to avoid these large infrastructure spends. So the question becomes, going back to Jeremy's point earlier, how many chargers can I install? And I want to do that without breaking the bank. And so in order to answer that question, we need to make use of a technology we call load management or energy management. Both terms are used in the industry. And the concept here is that we don't need to install a bigger pipe to the building, so to speak, to handle these EV chargers. And so the following graphic is going to show you what's going to happen as we continue to add EV chargers to the building. So let's say we have a building with a typical peak load in the evening, whether it's lighting, HVAC, residential. As we start to add EV chargers to the building one by one, we will eventually surpass the peak of what the building was designed for, and it becomes very expensive. And so the solution here, if I go back in that animation, is to control when charging happens rather than installing a big pipe to handle, peak charging right when everyone gets home from work at the end of the day. And so the reason we're able to do this is because in the evening hours, in the case of a multi-unit residential building, we've got midnight to 6 a.m., which is when the buildings are consuming very little energy. And so when a user comes home and plugs in after work at 5 or 6 o'clock, we're going to start charging their car, but the rate at which we charge the car will depend on the building's total consumption. And so if the building's running close to its peak, we're going to throttle down charging to release some stress and save on energy. But when the building starts to come down from its peak in the late evening hours, that's when we can ramp charging up. And the condition here is that everyone's vehicle is charged by 6 a.m. no matter what. So the goal is not charge slowly, it's charge the vehicles within the use case. And so this can occur in all different types of settings, including commercial buildings where you have a workplace, everyone shows up at 9 o'clock and plugs in, but you've got 8 hours to charge the vehicles. Rather than charging them all super quickly to get them done by lunchtime, let's stretch it out over the course of the day so that the building doesn't experience an added peak or an increased electrical peak, which can be taxing. Most utilities these days are putting on additional demand response taxes, and this can get expensive when you start talking about hundreds of kilowatts per building. So in conclusion on energy management, it is the way to save on the capital for the project because the infrastructure, and think of it like the pipe coming to those chargers, can be downsized, but while still meeting the needs of the drivers, which is charge by 5 o'clock, charge by 6 a.m., whatever it might be. And so on to our third pillar, let's talk EV drivers. So what is the driver experience in this conversation? And at the end of the day, the drivers need 3 core things. They need to be able to use the stations. They need to be able to pay for the energy that they consume. And if there's a problem, they need a way to get help. And so we satisfied those 3 things in a very clean and simple manner. I'll start by saying we're not looking to push people onto the apps. We find it tends to be the preferred method for most drivers, but you don't need to download an app. We do have the mobile app, which allows you to access and pay. So if we are in a building that you frequent, you'll likely download the app because it's the most seamless experience. But if you're a visitor, you don't have to download the app. You can access it through the QR code on the front of the machine. It brings you to a web page and you can check out as a guest, no account needed. And for those who frequent, let's say we're in your condominium, for example, you can request an RFID card and you tap that on the machine and you're ready charging and you can move on with your day. And so the question becomes, when the EV drivers access and pay, who's collecting the money and how do they pay? So we're setting the rates in that commissioning phase. So when you install chargers in your building, you'll get in touch with our accounts team and they'll recommend the rate depending on your geography, how many chargers, your electricity bills, etc. Switch is going to collect the money from the drivers and we're going to put it in a virtual bank account and deposit that back to the building on a monthly or quarterly basis. And so the accounting and billing side is 100% automated, and it's just going to show up every quarter in the account given to us by the property. Now I'm going to flip it back over to Jeremy because he's got a lot of really good in-market experience. But Jeremy, why don't you walk us through how EV charging extends beyond charging vehicles? What value can it bring to the building outside of just charging vehicles?
Great question, Thomas. So Thomas just now hit everyone with so much valuable information. And I hope that everyone took away from it that yes, the chargers are glorified electrical outlets. It's really the software is what makes these chargers smart. And when you're talking software, we then have the ability to scale software and really make it part of a building's ecosystem. So many of these buildings, again, doesn't even matter what class building, is running on some sort of prop tech platform. Maybe you have advanced garage platforms there. And what we want to do is we want to make that a seamless experience for the tenants and residents, maybe that reside within a building, or work in a given building, or park at a given building. So what we wanted to do was we just wanted to give you a high-level overview of some of these incredible integrations that we've done, just to illustrate how the EV charger now lives within a larger ecosystem. So here's one, for instance. We did a really cool integration with Flash Parking. Ani Group is a big developer, owner, operator of real estate across the US and Canada. They were a client of Switch's. We've installed thousands of chargers, hundreds of chargers with them, but they also use Flash Parking to service their parking garages. And they came to us and said, listen, wouldn't it be great if we can all play basically in the sandbox together? So what we did was we integrated the Switch software with the Flash Parking software. So that way, when a user or a driver goes into Flash Parking and they've already entered the lot, and maybe now they're using a charger, instead of them having to pay for multiple different use cases, such as reserving the parking garage and then charging or using for the EV charger, now they're just getting one bill under one roof, just streamlining the experience. It's all about the user experience. So this is just kind of one way that we're in a smart parking application system, and how EV charging fits into that. I would say the next use case is in the prop tech ecosystem. So there's just so many, there are hundreds of prop tech platforms that are out there that are servicing multifamily and commercial buildings to basically streamline efficiencies. Yardies, Entradas, Real Pages, MRI, Rent Manager, you kind of name it. Here was a great application that we did where we worked with Concora, which was a developer, and Smart One, which is a prop tech smart communities platform. Klaus was the multifamily parking garage operator, and Switch was installing EV chargers. And again, it was just the idea of saying, let's not make this more confusing for residents and tenants. Let's just bundle this all together. So basically, the Switch app lives within Smart One. And if you're a resident of the building and you're going to reserve amenity spaces, a conference room, maybe you're trying to book out one of the guest lounges because you're going to host a Super Bowl party. Well, now you can now you can reserve a parking spot through that app. And in turn, you're using a Switch charger. And again, just making billing seamless and easy for both the user as well as for the owner and operator as well. Here was another fun one we did. We partnered with CSC ServiceWorks, and CSC ServiceWorks is one of the largest and the oldest laundromat service operators out there in the country. They have literally thousands and thousands of laundry machines in multifamily environments. And CSC was in the midst of developing their platform for basically smart cards instead of using coins. Everyone was gearing towards an app or a smart card. And in turn, we integrated the Switch software there as well. So that way, if you were a user of the CSC card or mobile app for the laundry machine, if you happen to have an EV car within the same building, you can reserve your EV spot as well. So these are just, really fun, really cool, really forward-looking ways of how EV charging is now so integrated within the building's ecosystem. And as I started at the beginning of this presentation, how EV charging is a real estate play, and there's just so many, vendors and platforms that are servicing these types of assets. We can all play together and just make it as easy as possible. That's really what it's all about. So outside of the really cool and really fun experiences that I just shared, I think at the end of the day, everyone is scratching their head and saying, yes, this is great. We're charging cars, you're putting into building ecosystems. We just want it to work. And we hear you. For those of you that drive a traditional gasoline powered car right now, you know that when you go to the gas station, it is a flawless, seamless experience and nothing bad happens and it works every single time. Completely agree. We want to make it the same way for using a car charger. And unfortunately, in the news, sometimes you hear the X amount of chargers that are down or inoperable, or someone goes to use them and no one's there to fix it. And then people are left driving literally more miles than they needed running on empty just to charge the car. We hear you. We completely hear you. And that's why it's very important to have ongoing maintenance and support, for these devices. They are assets at the end of the day. They're also an amenity at the end of the day. And you want to make sure that these work and that your residents and tenants are satisfied. And reliability is absolutely everything. And you should have a plan. You're going to invest in the hardware. You're going to invest in the software, and you're certainly going to invest in the CapEx to put these in the ground. You want to make sure they work. So we offer this in a wide variety of ways. I would say from the hardware side, there's extended warranties that can be purchased. Purchase it. It's a no-brainer. Switch offers a extended O&M plan called Switch Care. I joke it's like an insurance policy, but it basically will extend the life of the charger all the way. We say about 5 years on a level 2 charger for commercial and multifamily. Take the care package. It's making sure that you're covered with parts and labor and warranties, in network parts, out of network parts, so on and so forth, because you just want it to work. Just like you would put ongoing maintenance and care packages on anything else that you'd invest in, do the same with the EV chargers. And this was just kind of alluding to, what I was saying, the software alone, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong in here and feel free to jump in. There's a difference between charger uptime and network uptime. And maybe Thomas, I'll let you touch upon this.
Yeah, it's a distinction that we started breaking out about a year and a half ago. And the reason for that is because it shows the different links in the chain for reliability. It's not just charger uptime, period. You have the device that's on site in its reliability, and then you have the network that it connects to in its reliability. To create an analogy, think of a cell phone and then the telecom provider that you're connected to. You can derive two different statistics for those two devices. And we like to break that out to understand where are the problem points so that we can go fix it. Throughout the US, with a lot of the NEVI funding for public charging stations, they actually require the networks like us to break it out because they want to be able to hold networks accountable to the service that they promote, as well as the charger manufacturers to the reliability of their units. And so we like to break this out as well as advertise it because they are industry standards and we are on the upper end of that. And to Jeremy's point, if we don't have good reliability, our customers are going to move on to another provider. And so we like to be very upfront with that so that people can know that they can hold us accountable to these rates and they have visibility into the performance of their chargers at their site and what their reliability is.
Thanks, Thomas. So as we kind of wrap this all up, we've spoken about the plan, ask the questions, go into it with an idea of how many can you install, how many should you install, working with qualified electricians, electrical contractors, those that install EV chargers all the time. You may have an electrical group that services your properties now, and they may be great. Feel free to use them. And if you say, listen, we don't know anyone who installs these things, lean on us. Happy to help that. The management of the EV chargers is everything. As Thomas alluded to earlier, it's the software. Let the software do all of the heavy lifting for you. There's no reason not to. And monetize off of that as well. And then the service. As with anything that you'd invest time and money into, just know that you are covered. Again, through extended warranties and care packages, because you never know when you may need it. I touched upon this earlier, and I didn't want to leave anyone hanging with this. So there are incredible incentive and rebate programs that are out there currently. And these happen whether they're on a federal level, which we'll jump into in a second, a city, a state, and a utility-wide level. And we wanted to highlight this map because some people think that, oh, only California, which you can see highlighted in black, is by far, the leader in electrification and ports that are out there. But don't discount these other states that are very bullish on making EV charging happen. We can work with your given property wherever it is. We can look at it on a city, a state, a utility-wide level to say, how can we leverage these available incentive and rebate programs that are out there to offset the CapEx that will be needed? Every program and incentive is different. Maybe what happened in 2024 may not necessarily be the case in 2025, but let us look into it. We will see what is out there because it's only in our best interest to help you furnish these funds as well. And as I was saying right before this, the slide before was city and state and utility-wide level. There is, through the Biden-Harris administration, was the 30C tax credit, which doesn't necessarily look on a city by state level, more of a census tract level. So you're able to input your property's address. You can see where it lands on their mapping tool. And there are some programs that went for 2024, 2029, and 2020 and 2030, I believe, are where we're currently at in their cycle. And again, it's just a great opportunity to take advantage of the free money that is out there. Because we just don't know what may happen in the near future. So take the money while it's there. There's no reason not to. That about wraps us up. We're maybe a few minutes early, but I think this is great because I saw some questions rolling through the chat. So I want to thank everyone for your time, and maybe Greg, over to you.
Yeah, that was great, guys. A bunch of cool questions. I think one question that's coming up, Bob's asked some really good questions. Let's first go with age of building. So he asked, how old are the buildings that will allow this to be added? So just a quick take on can any building get EV charging?
Yeah, I love this question personally. The short answer is yes. Any building can have and implement EV charging. It comes down to the electrical capacity. And one of the best conversations I have, and which is fun for me, I'll deal with owners and operators that, let's just say, have class B and C buildings. And they say, well, my tenants aren't the ones driving EV. I don't need these at my property. Yes, you do. Every car manufacturer is making some sort of electric vehicle. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a Tesla, a Porsche, a Maserati that's electric. It's going to be the common day car. It's already happening. Volkswagen, Toyota, you kind of name it. So your building can absolutely put in EV chargers. Let's just look at the electrical capacity that's there and determine how many we can actually put in.
And let's talk about profitability. The specific question is how many doors will you need to make this profitable? But I think the real question is let's talk about profitability in EV charging and how you guys would encourage people to reflect on profitability.
Yeah, I can maybe take that one. So you have to look at a number of metrics. The first one we start at is the price of energy. And so going back to my point earlier about setting the rate to at least match the price of energy over the course of the day, that's step one, as well as potentially adding a small margin to recoup the cost of installing and the maintenance over time. A lot of the people that we're working with today across portfolios are adding a small 10 or 15% margin on top of the cost of energy. And then over time, they'll slowly recoup that investment. Granted, if the location is not being used for EV charging, that ROI is going to take longer. But these days, most EV charging locations are seeing enough traffic to start that payback. So we don't like to promise it guaranteed because it all depends on the usage of the building. But generally speaking, it's an upward trend. And so it's only a matter of time before you see the critical volume in the building to have a profitable track.
And I guess holistically, the talk of NOI, talk of other ways other than the pure investment, give me a payback period. Kind of Jeremy talking about why, the holistic question around, is this a valuable spend for my property?
Yeah. And then just answering one of the questions from Andrew, when we're billing the rev share, we can set up a number of ways. You can do fixed fee per transaction. We can bill by the kilowatt hour. We can bill by time. There's a million ways we can do it. So short answer, yes. Yeah.
And then billing for the power used. I know you talked a little bit about it, but if you want to give an overview of like how the money flows.
Sure. So we know every port, every charger, how much energy flows through it for every transaction. And so you can think of the charger as an energy meter. And once the user unplugs or ends the session, we take a read on that meter and bill them for it. Since we know what the kilowatt hour value is, we can then multiply it by the rate that we set with the property owner or the owner of the station. And that's how we arrive at our rate that we're billing to the user's credit card.
Great.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on that, Andrew, one of the best things about Switch is we don't want to take a revenue share with the site host. That is your electric. Yeah, at the end of the day, there are a lot of other companies out there that are very interested in some sort of rev share just because they put the chargers on the property. For us, it's about supplying the chargers, site host just paying this annual software fee, and us remitting all the revenue back to the site host. The only thing we'd ever take out is the Stripe credit card processing fee. So it's a big differentiator from some other groups that are out there.
Great, thanks for that. We're at time, so I want to be conscious of that. For everyone, you will get an email following this with the recording. For those who want it or want to share it, if anyone of your colleagues want to look at it, you'll be able to have that link. Otherwise, you can reach Jeremy email or Jeremy and Thomas. They're both on LinkedIn. Feel free to send questions that you have if we didn't get to them. But otherwise, really appreciate taking the time and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.